Perfect. Thank you so much, Avara family. Go around and each introduce ourselves, then we'll get into some questions. I'm Amanda Casssatt, aka Amanda.eth, Amanda.lens. I'm the founder and CEO of Serotonin, and we bring the world's breakthrough technologies to market.
Very good. Marc, I'm the least aggressive French, as they say, founder of the ACI, the Aave China Initiative. We are service provider to the Aave DAO, and we are the largest delegate of the Aave DAO.
I'm Dave from Karpatkey. Karpatkey is a treasury management company for DAOs. So we help DAOs manage their treasury and their finances. And among our partners, we work closely with Aave, and we also work closely with Spark. And yeah, happy to be here.
Hello, I'm Mike. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Etherfi. Etherfi's goal is to make DeFi easy and accessible for normal people. And we do that by having 3 products, Etherfi Stake, Etherfi Liquid, and Etherfi Cash, that help you save, invest, and spend your crypto in real life.
Hello, I'm Sam, CEO of Phoenix Labs. We have built Spark, which is a lending market, which is a now friendly fork of Aave. And so, yeah, we're working on that.
Great. We have a wonderful panel here to talk about everyone's favorite thing: incentives, rewards, points, boosts, etc. And obviously, that space has evolved and changed so much. We've seen so many different new strategies come into being. Maybe, I don't know, we can start wherever we want, whoever wants to jump in first. How have you seen the evolution of points and incentives in this space? What are the major things that you've seen change since you first started building? I'll let anyone grab that who wants to go first.
I think, Mike, you're an expert on the topic.
Yeah,
When error.
Yeah, I think we either get credit or blame, depending on your position for the points meta. When we were starting out, I mean, this was back in February of like 2023. We had like this crazy idea, you know, why don't we create like a loyalty point system the way that airlines or credit card companies have them, instead of instead of distributing tokens, because at that time, we were very worried about enforcement actions and things like that related to token launches. I think as much as people have gotten grumpy lately about points systems, I actually think that it is an improvement versus the prior model, where you would use a project, do a whole bunch of random stuff, hoping to get an airdrop, and then you would get a random number of tokens, and it was completely opaque because you didn't really know what actions contributed to one thing or another. So I think that's that's an improvement. At least now there's some clarity about what actions the protocol wants you to take, and the question then becomes, what are the right ways to use points incentives in order to get users to actually stick around and do the things that you want them to do. So I think it's actually been a positive change.
I think it's quite interesting to see the data around that. And there's definitely protocols where it works, and other protocols that are completely PvP and farmer maximalist. And then usually you see the airdrop, especially on some layer 2s recently, and then TVL goes minus 90% overnight. And that's not the case for everyone. I think the more substance you have, the more people will stick around, because the incentive and the subsidy are not a new thing. Like in Web 2, there's subsidy for everything. If you create a Uber account, probably your first or 2 or 3 rides, depending on who you are and where you are, will be for free. That's an incentive. We didn't invent anything in DeFi. But why do people do that? Because it works. I have data because we did the script this morning with the ACI about the CBBTC USDC campaign that we are running currently on mainnet. For every dollar of incentive, we've seen $1,613 of growth. So it's actually working very, very well. But the way you can design that to work in the long term is to create something that has sustenance for the future. And for example, this campaign is that you have some Bitcoin correlated asset, and you borrow stable coins probably to go long or to not sell your Bitcoin. This is a use case that makes sense whether it's incentivized or not. So the incentive just boosts the adoption of the thing, but the thing will remain no matter what, even if you cut the incentive, because the use case makes sense. And I think that's the make it or break it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's what we've seen as well. And we've actually done our own analysis similarly, where we, during our first points seasons, Etherfi had big point seasons before we launched our token. Internally, we actually had kind of come to expect or accept that we were spending these huge amounts of tokens, tens of millions of dollars to incentivize users. And we looked at it and said, look, this is not going to be profitable. This is going to be a huge cost. And look, we're investing for the long term. But then when we came back and actually ran the numbers, and the ROI was comparable to like think of it as like a B2B SaaS marketing campaign where you spend $1 and then maybe it takes a year to get paid back in terms of revenue that the user brings in. And they actually were totally within reason. In other words, the numbers were not wildly off. And so far what we've seen is our TVL has not only stuck around, but has actually ended up growing since then. So I think there's definitely a case to be made that once you overcome this sort of activation energy and you get enough adoption, that this actually can be a viable strategy.
Yeah, so basically with points, if you're giving people rewards and they don't convert to continued usage once you stop the rewards, it's bribes. Yeah. And if they continue once you have stopped the rewards, then it was a high ROI marketing campaign.
Well, it's about, I think, there's like, you could do a whole PhD probably on these incentive systems, but the key is to incentivize the thing that you want people to do, not some precursor to it. Because what I see people doing, or projects doing often, is they'll incentivize like leading indicators of engagement and usage, and then great, people obviously game those engagement metrics. Like, to pick a random example, like a bridge that incentivizes lots of bridging transactions. So of course people game that, do 1 billion bridging transactions, instead of I don't know what you would incentivize for a bridge.
The amount of value. Like, it would be the value.
Yeah, something like that.
Volume.
So the key is incentivize the thing that you actually want and make sure you're creating enough value that users will stick around.
That's something we work a lot on the ACI. So we created the merit program. And the whole thing was because we spend dozens and dozens of millions of dollars on liquidity mining, because back in the DeFi summer, we used to have a liquidity mining program with the Aave token, with the Aave DAO, and it was massively popular. But what we learned from all this liquidity campaign is that if you only provide supply when, as a liquidity protocol, you earn your profit on the borrowing volume, people will just deposit 10 million or 100 million in your protocol and don't borrow, and it will not create sustainable economic activity. So with Merit, we actually started to design, okay, we're not going to focus on supply, we're not going to focus on borrow the volume itself, but we're going to focus on the use case. What you're going to do with that kind of collateral, what you're going to borrow with it, what's your interaction in the protocol, are you participating in governance? And we try to design the system within the Aave DAO and the Aave ecosystem to extract the most added value from the user actions. And I think we need to go as an ecosystem beyond just, if you provide some liquidity, you will get an airdrop or you will get some points. You have to design things around the use case if you want to make it sustainable and if you want to scale it.
I'm curious to hear from Sam and from Dave how you've seen incentives change or evolve over your time in the space.
Yeah, so for DAI, actually, DAI was a major beneficiary of the DeFi summer as a stable coin. It was getting incentivized alongside Tether USDC. And DAI grew from like 100 million at the beginning of 2020. It was very small. It blew up to like billions, like in the matter of like months. It was actually, the growth was so insane, like it was hard to deal with. And some of it seems to have stuck around in the long term. But yeah, there was this like big run up. DAI peaked at about $10 billion at the 2021 cycle. And a lot of that unwound very quickly, especially after the Terra Luna explosion. There was, all the yield farming basically went away. But this is kind of a theme. You have this like bootstrapping effort where you have these rewards and stuff like that, but it's important that you, in the end, have like a product that people actually want to use. So, you know, starting these things up is good for a bootstrapping effort, but yeah, you really want these organic users in the long run, and so it's important to make sure that it's an actual product that people want to use. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a user, I guess the best incentives are the ones you don't know about, like the OG airdrops, where you were just using protocols because you actually like them and got rewarded for that. And I feel like in between, we moved to the expectation of airdrops, so everyone was farming everything. And I also tend to agree that the points might be like a better solution to the second one, where everyone's just farming it, due to the ability to also attract TVL, right? Like in the OG airdrops, you were using what you wanted. But therefore your airdrop didn't necessarily attract new liquidity. So I think it's like a tricky situation. Like Marc said, a lot of these projects like TVL disappears overnight once the points campaign is over and the TG takes place. So I think it's very difficult, and it's something the products have to design well. But you know, as Sam mentioned, the important part is that the product is actually something they want to use. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the history, and I feel like we went from these OG airdrops where you don't even understand what the reward mechanism is going to be. You're just a genuine user, and you're kind of hoping and waiting, and you have it in the back of your mind. And that's evolved toward this world of points, where people feel very clear from day one what they can expect, at least in terms of what proportion of it they can expect to get. And part of the reason for that is in order to mitigate legal concerns around the TGE, right? Having these points be available. But if we live in a world where suddenly this is way more acceptable and people don't have as many of those types of concerns, I imagine it'll continue to evolve. We're calling today DeFi Renaissance Day, so let's talk about what's next and what's being reborn here. Is there something after points? Or is there a way that these reward schemes are going to evolve, do you think?
I mean, the end game for everybody is build a product people are ready to pay for instead of being paid for. And that's the comfortable position Aave is right now, is that people pay to be to use the Aave protocol because the intrinsic quality of the Aave protocol is good enough for them to pay for the service. And I think that's the end game for everybody. Everybody try to reach that scale. And some of the more and more people and protocol in the ecosystem are reaching that state because we are getting more and more mature. I think like the immaturity phase of the protocol is behind us. This cycle will be more and more focused, I think, on the real use case.
Probably agree, yeah.
I mean,
So how do rewards programs, how do incentive programs evolve in a world where, let's say this is true, and we have more DeFi products with real users and real product market fit?
I think the end game is to have a DSR, for example, when you have a stablecoin, which is not directly an incentive program, but a liquidity thing that is a redistribution of part of the profit of the Sky ecosystem.
You're talking about the Spark token distribution?
No, I'm talking about DSR, the saving rate.
Yeah.
And I think that's the end game, is that when you have a protocol that is as sustainable as Sky, you can afford to redirect part of your net profit in order to maintain your peg and grow your liquidity as a liquid sink, and it actually makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's interesting, like whether you consider it like an incentive or not. The Sky savings rate now, previously DAI savings rate. So this is 6.5%. Actually, I think it's going to be increased by 2% very soon.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's like I wouldn't really consider it an incentive program, but really just the baseline of what you have to offer users to be in this highly and increasingly competitive market, which is stablecoins. So the days of offering zero yield are long gone. Tether is completely dominant in that regard. So as a stablecoin, really the only way you compete is by offering a yield. And USDS, formerly known as DAI, is positioning itself to offer like the best relatively stable rate within the space. So as I mentioned, it's 6.5% going up to 8.5%. And where does that yield come from? This is, to my colleagues' points earlier, it's important that this yield is sustainable. It's not just some, giant pump and dump crazy, whatever. So where does the yield come from? It comes from a mix of real world assets, primary treasury bills, and then the other portion comes from crypto native lending. So the crypto native lending has always been the biggest revenue generator by far. People like to go leverage long on ETH and Bitcoin, and so they're willing to pay large amounts to do that. And so this is the bread and butter of Maker, now Sky, and always has been.
Yeah, maybe one thing I could say in terms of where things are going. The problem in crypto is that there is always like the easy button to making money, which is, clone some nonsense project or clone a legit project into something, launch a token, invest, cash out, and it's basically like there's these giant casinos in the sky, right? And you can print casino chips and collect a rake, and that's a viable business model in the crypto space, and so. The less sustainable incentive models are totally compatible with that, and that's why they've proliferated. So I think there's going to be a bifurcation between projects that actually have utility that makes sense long term, with or without incentives, and incentives are an accelerant to that, versus projects that really are just kind of grifts, and it's very hard sometimes to differentiate between the two. For the legit projects that actually have a viable path to sustainability. That's where you have to be very careful with incentives so that you're not just generating fake activity that's going to disappear. But I don't know what's going to change to make it, to shift the balance from nonsense to the real stuff.
Yeah, I can briefly speak about what we've done for Gnosis DAO. So Gnosis DAO obviously has Gnosis Chain, which is a chain, and as Karpatkey, we also try and help incentivize users to come to Gnosis Chain and use it. Previously, we did just do GNO incentives, but we found that wasn't very efficient. It just attracted like non-sticky liquidity. But the native token of Gnosis Chain is actually DAI. So one thing we actually took is we took the savings product from Maker, and all the DAI that's in our bridge, we actually deposited it into the DSR, and then all this yield is paid out to a separate savings contract on Gnosis Chain. And then we integrated this very deeply throughout our ecosystem. So Balancer and all the LP pools, they actually are based on SDAI. And due to the fact that you have more DAI in the bridge than users of SDAI on Gnosis, you actually also get a higher yield than you do on mainnet. And that's like something we found that was like super successful. We have like, I believe around 70 million today just deposited into SDAI. And then being able to integrate that further into the chain at the LP level allows people who provide liquidity more attractive returns as well. So it's like totally non-points related, but that's something we've seen has worked pretty well for us.
I'm actually a user. The ACI, we are a European company, so our accounting is in Europe, and we are paid in Go, which is a USD-based stablecoin. So what I do is that I exchange my Go to SDAI, I put that in Gnosis, and then on Aave, and I borrow some Euro E from Monerium, and I send that to my corporate account. So
this is a very interesting use case.
Yeah, it's actually a real-world use case, of DeFi.
I think like everybody's doing this with the Gnosis card, right?
Yeah, and I have the Gnosis card as well, because I'm a Gnosis taker, and I have 5% cashback. I love it.
Yeah.
And it works in Thailand.
So you guys should all get a Gnosis Pay card on Gnosis Chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So I think a lot of our audience are builders and are interested in creating something in DeFi. And so I'm curious, what are your tips and best practices for anyone trying to design an incentives or rewards program for their project? We've already heard reality is the undisputed champion, to quote Bezos there, that if it's not going to get product market fit without the rewards and incentives, then it's not going to work. Let's take that as a given. Other than that, what would you recommend to people in terms of how to architect that program?
Well, if you look at the data, just use Aave. In the sense that $1 of incentive directed to Aave user is $1,600 of growth, and nobody can beat that in the ecosystem. It's true on mainnet, it's true on Base, it's true on Arbitrum, it's true on every single network we are. So if you want to grow, just align with the Aave protocol. Just use Aave.
What do you think it is about? Why do you think that's the case? What do you think makes that different?
Because the Aave brand we are probably the toughest protocol on the whole ecosystem in terms of due diligence. A lot of other protocols, they will be like, yeah, we're going to list your asset, we're going to put any oracle to do that, we don't care about the underlying value of the collateral or all of this kind of stuff, which is good for them, it's their vision, but Aave only onboard quality, and the Aave DAO has been extremely strict on the onboarding of asset on Aave, so being on Aave is a sign that you are joined the blue chip club, and nobody can provide that else than Aave.
So there's a whole science out there, quite a bit of work that you can look up that relates to recurring revenue businesses. And I actually think that's a pretty good model for most of DeFi. You have a user, that user engages in some activity that generates revenue for the protocol. And so there's a whole science around unit economics. What does it cost you to acquire a user? How much revenue does that user generate? What's your lifetime value of the user? What's your churn? What are the ratios of your lifetime value versus your cost of acquisition? And so there's a whole science around, okay, if you incentivize X dollars and the user generates Y dollars and relating the two, what actually makes sense? What's going to be a viable business versus something that is just a Ponzi that's going to be a flash in the pan. So all I would say is maybe just look at the work that's been done. There's tons of research and there's books. Lots of books have been written on these types of business models, how to put together financial models that forecast whether these things make sense. I think spending even a day doing that work will set you ahead of probably 95% of crypto companies.
Thinking is a big advantage. Anything you guys want to add?
Anything? Not really. Typically, I'm on the other end of the points program, farming them with Karpatkey. So.
Yeah, I guess the only thing, what Mike says is correct. But you got to also make it fun. This is DeFi. We got dank memes and stuff like that. So make it fun. That's important as well.
And I think we're at time. Thanks so much,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. That was so cool.